Today we're doing a special briefing to update Jamaica on the status of the investigations and actions being taken by the government in response to the crime that took place on Sunday, where we had 8 Jamaicans losing their lives senselessly in Cherry Lane in Four Paths, Clarendon. This morning, we have the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica. We have the Honourable Dr. Horace Chang, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security. Dr. McCoy, our Attorney General, is also here. Vice Admiral Antoinette Weems-Gorman, our Chief of Defence Staff. Mr. Fitz-Bailey, our Acting Commissioner of Police. Other guests, and lots of members of the media. I see a lot of media celebrities are here today. We welcome all members of the media, the old faithfuls, as we'd call them, who are always here for these briefings, and those who are especially here today. This morning, we are going to be going through these updates in our usual order. First, we'll have DCP Bailey, who is Acting Commissioner of Police. He'll give us an update on the status of the investigations, and he will be followed right after by our Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Chang, who will speak to states of emergencies and other measures being taken. And then we will have the Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, will be speaking to us about generally where things are, where we're going, and some of the other initiatives that are being taken by the government of Jamaica. After that, there'll be time for questions from the media. I again note that we're requesting that each person, there are lots of you here today, that each person does one question related to this matter. Today we are speaking about what happened in Clarendon and the status of those investigations. So we're going to start with DCP Fitz-Bailey, who is the Acting Commissioner of Police.
The Most Honourable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honourable Dr. Horace Chang, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Chief of Defence Staff, Attorney General, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The recent murder in Cherry Lane, Clarendon, has left our nation in shock and grief. The brutal and indiscriminate killing of 8 innocent persons, including a child and 3 women, as well as the injuring of 9 others, including a baby, has troubled the minds of decent, law-abiding citizens here and abroad. This is not normal, and no self-respecting country will ever accept this as normal. Our response to this heinous crime has been swift and impactful. We have since seized an illegal firearm and have apprehended at least 5 persons. In fact, 1 person turned himself in yesterday. We continue to work tirelessly to uncover the truth and ensure that those responsible are held accountable under the rule of law. Our investigation has made significant progress, revealing connections to at least 6 previous violent incidents in Clarendon. These incidents include a quadruple murder in Havana Heights in 2021, a murder committed on April 21st, 2024, and a subsequent shooting and arson that was committed on April 25 in West Park. The other incidents include a murder that was committed on April 29 in the Cherry Lane, a murder that was committed on May 11 along Fogar Road, Maypen, as well as a murder that was committed on May 15 in Yorktown. Unfortunately, our findings indicate that these local violent issues have international roots and incorporate local players, some of whom are incarcerated. These individuals who once were friends in Jamaica had a falling out in the United States over illegal obtained gains, leading to each taking homicidal contracts to incite fear and terror. Criminal actors in prisons were contacted to facilitate these contracts through their criminal networks, resulting in the senseless bloodshed here in Jamaica. We are committed in removing those responsible from our streets and to restoring public confidence and trust in our ability to keep Jamaicans safe. In light of this accepted duty, it is important that we isolate those who are responsible wherever they are and to offer our public the level of safety assurance needed. We are mindful of the likely reprisal that will take place in several areas within and outside of Clarendon. I want to reassure the public that the security forces will use all resources available to mitigate any threat of reprisal and will be available to use other legislative tools that is available to us. We appeal to good conscience and those locally and within our diaspora to partner with us in identifying those criminal actors and sharing whatever you know with the police. Together we can create a safer, more just society for all. Thank you.
Honorable Prime Minister, leaders of the security forces, members of the media present and those online, good morning. After careful consideration and review of the current situation as a result of events in Clarendon, His Excellency the Governor General has declared a state of public emergency for the parish of Clarendon. The Honorable Prime Minister has advised the Governor General to make such a declaration on the recommendation of the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police. Our informed assessment is that high levels of violent criminal activity experienced within the specified area is of such nature and such an extensive scale that it endangers public safety. This large single-day account of murders within the parish of Clarendon is attributed to ongoing violence within the division that had reached a tenuous magnitude, resulting in the eventual perpetration of murders as a means of intimidation and further as a form of reprisal as gangs seek to dominate existing turf. Again, to gain new turf and benefit from lagers. It is foreseen that this current rate of perpetuation will escalate on the consideration that additional numbers of gangs across the division will inevitably be impacted and hence minded to perpetrate similar acts of intimidation and reprisal. A state of emergency was declared on the 23rd of November 2023 in Clarendon and expired on the 6th of December 2023. During this period, the division experienced one shooting incident only. This amounts to a reduction of 100% in murder and 50% in shooting incident over this 14-day period when compared to an equivalent period of time prior to the SOE, during which 3 murders and 2 shooting incidents were recorded. This state of public emergency comes not only as a single act. The government will be attacking gangs in all sections of Jamaica. There were 4 curfews across the southern belt last night in division, the Clarendon division, and in the corporate area. There are multiple operations across the western belt and outside of Kingston in areas where it is known that gangs operate. Several people were detained. The police will have those details. Events of this nature will be met with the full force of the law, and the government will not be shy in taking all steps to provide the police with required powers to do so. An event of this sort will have to go back over a decade to identify such an event. But I recall with some graphic view as it happened in my own constituency, when on one afternoon there were 19 shootings, 11 deaths. The police retaliated with traditional tools. By Monday morning, there was 27 deaths. I recall very graphically, and I see some of the officers here recall it with, recall the event. Events of this sort do not leave your mind for life. So we take steps to provide the police with the additional tools to prevent reprisals and counter-reprisal, and we will not deter or apologize for such activity. This government is committed to protecting the lives of Jamaicans, all its citizens. We note that, in fact, at the present time, the reduction in major crimes and homicide has been significant. The 17% reduction in homicide, we'll have to go back 20 years to identify an area in which this kind of reduction took place. We also have provided the police with this kind of tools, strong and effective means of intercepting and apprehending violence producers, because today, too, we are confident the police is in a much better position than they were a decade ago. They are stronger, they are better equipped, and we have a team of highly professional police officers. The sub-officers and commanding officers on the road today, I am confident, and I know, and they are not police officers in the police force because a job of last resort. They are bright young Jamaicans, experienced officers who are in the police force because they want to be police officers. They are committed to maintaining peace and good order. As a government, we will give them the tools required to be able to be effective against these horrendous criminals who are taking this kind of activity. Today, we have declared a state of emergency in Clarendon. We'll utilize the 14 days, and any discussion of any further activity depends on the situation at the end of the day. But we are confident the police will use these tools, supported by the Jamaica Defence Force, to effectively control the rise of criminal violence in Clarendon. And thank you. And we are now going to call on our Chief of Defence Staff to further explain the actions of the mobilization of the security forces. Thank you.
PM, Honorable Prime Minister, other members of the security forces, members of the press, Jamaicans, good morning. As indicated, there will be a state of public emergency for the JDF has already postured and is deployed to support this state of public emergency in this space. Our commitment to ensuring that this cowardly act in Clarendon and other criminal activities will be dealt with, and the military capabilities of the Jamaica Defence Force remain available and will be used in full force to support the JCF to bring back order, not only in Clarendon, but to ensure that Jamaicans can feel safe as they do their normal business. We also ask that persons with information call our tip line. The JDF tip line is 876-827-8888. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Please forgive my dressing down. Today is a field day for me. However, the brutal killing of 8 innocent Jamaicans, which has prompted the government to mobilize all its resources to respond, is something that I make a priority. And all our security forces, the JCF, JDF, MOCA, our intelligence services, all our security forces have been mobilized in this regard. The Deputy Prime Minister has just given an update on the declaration of a state of public emergency for the parish of Clarendon. This is as a result of our analysis of the intelligence available and the very high probability, indeed, I would go as far as to say, even though it was not said by Acting Commissioner Bailey, attempts at retaliation and reprisals. As Minister Chang pointed out, that when incidents like these have occurred in the past, when you take the accumulated murders that are connected to the initial event, you end up in 10s and 20s and 30s. So we are very careful in ensuring that this incident does not spark a string of additional murders and therefore the implementation of the SOE in Clarendon. The SOE is not designed to be an inconvenience to the citizens, and the security forces will be using this additional power in a very targeted and strategic way. I want to assure the public that our security forces, in as much as we are focused on getting the criminals and those who are responsible, we are also focused on protecting the human rights of our citizens. The rights of the victims, clearly, in my opinion, should take priority, but we also have a duty as a civilized country to show the criminals that we act within the law. So I want that point to be absolutely clear, and you would have seen this in the conduct of the police force in their operations so far. They have been very professional, very strategic, very targeted, and it is not just talk. Talk is important. We must bring the public along. We must share information. The public must be aware of what is happening. But we must also report progress. We must report actions, and we must report challenges. And that is what we have been doing as we try to come to grips with what has happened in our nation. In the last press conference, somebody said, would you describe this as a mass shooting? I would say, if you were to use the language in a semantic way, yes, it is a mass shooting, but mass shootings have a particular connotation. I think a more accurate description that this is armed, organized violence perpetrated by criminal enterprises. So this is a gang-related event which is over and above what the average would have been. And so we are going to treat it in that way and focus on gangs. We have had the traditional notion that gangs are a social response to poverty, disenfranchisement, unemployment. I would suggest to those persons who hold this view that that is an outdated notion. The gangs that we are dealing with are highly resourced. They are not poor. They are not struggling for money. They operate as an enterprise. They have structure, they have leadership, and they have systems and rules. And I want you to also bear in mind that they operate on intelligence. They study our police force. They use information operations. They use our banking system. They use our telecommunication system. They use social media. They are well structured and well organized. And what they do is that they entrench themselves in communities and take advantage of poor, dispossessed youth. They give them guns. They use them as lookouts. They use them to commit crimes. They use the term, they lock the area. So they take over our young people, our unsuspecting women, and they use them as foot soldiers, as pawns in the game. And that is what we're dealing with. The entrenchment of this kind of organized armed violence is a threat not just to the communities in which they exist, it is a threat to the very stability of the state. When I went to the community of Cherry Tree on Monday, it was heartbreaking. It could be any community. In my own constituency, people play bingo all the time. The bingo table is a place of, social gathering. And this was not a drive-by. These men were deliberate. They stopped their vehicles, they came out, and they pursued victims. And they didn't do it in just one location. They left the location where the bingo was at and went to another location and did the same thing. So I want the nation to understand that this is a different level of criminality. You can only describe this as an act of terror. It wasn't carried out by someone who is mentally ill or someone with a social vendetta. This was carried out in the pursuit of a criminal vendetta. It is the use of violence in support of the entrenchment of the power of the gang. It is an act of terror, and it has to be treated in that way, and the public needs to understand the evolving nature of the criminality that we face. And what the government has been doing is building the capacity of our security forces to be able to address this level of criminality. Very instructive for me in visiting the community and speaking with the mother of one of the victims, who was very effusive in her praise for the police force in the area, that they had ongoing patrols. The area was under active police operations. But it is clear that these criminals would have studied the rhythm of the police and took an opportunity. This is the level of criminality that we are dealing with. So I know that there are certain narratives that are usually carried, but I would urge persons to be very careful about how they seek to characterize what is happening here. The JCF, the JDF, MOCA, and all our security apparatus is responding not in the traditional way. We have new modalities and new ways of responding to this. So there may be persons who would be expecting to see mass mobilizations and, mass arrests and all kinds of, no, that's not how the JCF, the JDF, and our security forces operate. We are operating in an information-rich and intelligence-driven strategic environment. That is what we are doing, which is why hours after the incident, Acting Commissioner Bailey can report progress. He can report that 5 persons have been arrested with connections to the incident, with a firearm connected. 1 person has turned himself in. So the impact is there. Now, as it relates to the wider strategy, I want to spend a few minutes on that. The potential for reprisals leads us also to look at other gangs who may be involved. So once we have zeroed in on the gangs that are responsible, we know that the connections and cooperation exist where the gangs that we have zeroed in on may very well subcontract. I hate to use that term, but that's the best way to convey it. They may very well go into collaboration with other gangs to carry out their reprisals. And therefore, our strategic response is not going to be limited only to the gangs we know to be involved, but to a wider area. And therefore, my comments regarding ensuring that there is a wide net around gangs, an attack, an assault on gangs and gang culture is very appropriate as a result of this incident. So this is an opportunity for the government to mobilize fully, to have a very serious focus on gangs. And I want to point out that the government has had a long-standing strategy for the last 5 years in tackling gangs. About 5 years ago, we estimated that there were about 400 gangs that were active within our Jamaican space. My last report from the Minister of National Security on Monday was that we are now down to 185 active gangs. But by any measure, having 185 active gangs in our space is still very high. The intention is to bring the gangs down to 0. And it is important, therefore, that the public understands that these gangs that are in your communities, they are not your protectors. They are not your friends. So, one of the strategies to erode the gangs is to create an environment where citizens can provide information. It is the information that is going to destroy the network of the gangs and remove the space for gangs to operate in the community. So another action that the government will take in support of promoting an information-rich environment is that we have now established a fund of 25 million Jamaican dollars. The fund is in the Ministry of National Security, and it is focused primarily on this incident. We will provide 6 million Jamaican dollars for information, credible information, and intelligence leading to the arrest and charge of any suspect involved in the killing, particularly those who were involved in pulling the trigger. And that is up to a maximum amount of $1 million per person. Secondly, we will provide $5 million for information aiding in the investigation, arrest, and charge of facilitators of this criminal act, up to a maximum of $1.5 million per person. We're particularly interested in the facilitators and the organizers. The facilitators, those who provided the weapons or gave access to the weapons and ammunition, access to the motor vehicle, organized, made the telephone calls, made the connections. We're particularly interested in those persons. We will give a reward for the provision of information and intelligence leading to the recovery of the firearms that were involved in this killing. We're particularly interested in that and any information on the networks involved in the supply of those firearms. And we will provide $5 million for the supply of information and intelligence resulting in the securing of evidence, any form of evidence, against the gangs that were involved in this operation. Lastly, we will provide a fund of $5 million leading to the arrest and charge for anyone harboring the criminal gangs or their associates, a maximum of $800,000 per person identified. So this is a $25 million fund that is aimed at increasing the pace at which information is flowing in for the investigation. This fund will be under the administration of the Ministry of National Security, and the traditional methods of providing information can be used, but any method that you use to get the information in, once it is forwarded to the Ministry of National Security and the relevant details are available, the payments will be made securely. I wish to remind you of the methods of contact to provide information to the security forces securely. Crime Stop, 311, Police Emergency, 119, the NIB, National Investigation Bureau tip line, 811, MOCA tip line, 888 MOCA tip, that is 888-662-2847. And the JDF tip line, 837-888. Repeat them again. Crime Stop, 311. Police Emergency, 119. The NIB tip line, 811. MOCA, 662-2847. And the JDF tip line, 837-888. So, this administration is taking this act of terror very seriously. It is the second time that I've had to use this term to describe an act of this nature. I would remind the nation of the brutal killing which took place in St. James, where a criminal used a high-powered weapon, opened fire on a public passenger transport vehicle, which killed 3 persons, including 2 school children. We used a similar strategy of mobilizing the community, deployment of a state of public emergency, focused and targeted information, and within weeks we were able to bring those responsible to justice. I'm expecting that we will have similar, if not better results, in fact more impactful results as we respond to this. And as I close my presentation, I will say that we cannot allow murders to become normalized in our country. And therefore, there must be a very strong response to these kinds of incidents. Thank you.
And thank you to the team for your presentations. We're now going to open up to the media. As we said earlier, there are many of you who are here. I know many of you have questions. We will ask you to keep it to one question. And the PM does have to go out of tone, as you said, in terms of the way he's dressed. And I invite you all to be up here. CDS, you too, as we take the first question. Naomi?
Good morning, Kimon Francis from the Gleaner. Prime Minister, what message of fear can the state reasonably send to criminals when those behind bars can orchestrate murders still? And are considerations on the table for a new maximum security facility?
Thank you for that question, Kimon. The government is not in the business of spreading fear. What the government is in the business of is ensuring that our security apparatus is robust and that those persons who would consider crime would have to consider the quick and swift and effective response of the security apparatus. And that can only come by being calculating, by being strategic, and by being studied in our approach. In other words, the government has to create a security environment that changes the risk-reward for criminal action. Fear, I'm sure, can do it, but fear, the creation of fear, also creates fear in citizens. And so we want to be very cautious. This is not about creating fear in our citizens. We want our citizens to have confidence in the security forces, and we want the criminals to have to think twice before they act. Risk-reward must change, and that's what we've been doing in all that we have done. In fact, what we have done here today changes the risk-reward nature of any crime that may be considered following from this initial action. Are we considering legislative measures, and are we considering the construction of a new prison? The legislative measures are already underway. We have made amendments to the Corrections Act to increase penalties for contraband. I will allow the Minister to explain where we are with the new Corrections Act, but there is a new Corrections Act being drafted. As it relates to the construction of a new prison facility, yes, we have actually had many discussions. We actually have draft plans. The issue, of course, is the budgetary constraints. There are many demands on the budget. Building a new prison would certainly draw quite a bit of political attention as to whether or not that is wise use of funds when we need new hospitals, new schools, roads, and all the other issues. So we have to be very careful as a government how we make these kinds of fiscal allocations. But I'm thinking now, obviously, and in the consciousness of the public, that clearly there needs to be more modern prison facilities where we can effectively cut off the communication and the contact of prisoners. So the contemplation that we have and that we have started to develop plans, I believe, CDS, you might want to say a few words on the plans that we have, is really focused on how we can build a high security facility where these kinds of criminal masterminds can be effectively separated from the society.
Question?
Good morning, Kelisha Williams, Television Jamaica. After Monday's press conference, there was a video circulating on social media with an individual, masked individual, issuing threats towards the Prime Minister. Can you say, DCP Bailey, in regards to how the police have been treating that incident?
We have identified the individual. It's somebody who has been on our radar before, and efforts are now being made to take him into custody. The investigation is well advanced.
Zara Burton here with 18 Degrees North. I would like to ask the Prime Minister about the U.S. involvement. Has the U.S. reached out regarding this issue of Cherilyn? Additionally, has the U.S. reached out on the now upgraded number of the illicit 8 versus the illicit 6? What has the U.S. said in each case? And also, if you could just give a feedback as to whether they've reached out, excuse me.
Yesterday, I had discussions with the U.S. ambassador. He passed on his condolences to the family and assured us of the support of the U.S. government in whatever way they could meaningfully assist. I don't like to speak too much on the collaborations because that could have an impact on ongoing investigations and operations. But suffice to say that the United States has been and continues to be one of our most important partners in the fight against crime and the illegal trafficking of weapons and contraband into the region. We have a very robust cooperation with them.
Question, sir, and then we'll wrap. Alicia?
Well, I really wanted to hear from Dr. Chang regarding the new Corrections Act. But further, on Monday, you said that there were some gangs who were collaborating in the matter. So I wanted to know if you're any closer to saying which those are.
Thank you. First, the new correction is in the drafting stage. We have, in fact, put on the table, of course, the new corrections policy, which provides the framework for the development of new legislation. It's something that we expect it will not conclude in this parliament year, but in the next parliament year, we should be able to bring the new corrections out. Important in ensuring we have the required legislative framework to manage effectively the individuals incarcerated and jailed. But just to add that it is not that it's not without control. We, in fact, monitor the activities of these prisoners, not only by investigating and removing contraband from the prison, but the police monitors carefully. That's why some of the intelligence, without going into details, are able to identify beforehand, intercept, and sometimes save the lives of some of the very criminals who are involved. So work is done to manage the situation quite effectively, but there will be slippage occasionally.
Our final question then, Mahiri.
Morning, Mahiri Stewart from Nationwide News. So, following the shooting incident in Clarendon, the opposition leader Mark Golding stated that, quote, there have been several instances of multiple killings in Clarendon in recent years, with this one being the most egregious. I stand ready to cooperate with the government to achieve bipartisan action to come to grips with this utterly untenable situation. My question is, what is your response to this indication from the opposition leader that the opposition is willing to cooperate with the government in this fight against crime?
My initial reaction was that I always thought that they have said they were willing to cooperate. But I'm happy to know that there is a reinforcement of that position. The challenge is actions rather than statements. The cooperation that is needed is on the legislative agenda. Listen, I don't take the view that there is anyone in Jamaica who wants to see crime get out of hand. I come to the table with the perspective that everyone is a patriot looking to ensure the best for Jamaica. So I understand the positions of persons who may oppose the positions that I hold. The curious thing is that when roles are changed, then those persons who oppose the position I hold now adopt the position. So it says that sometimes the positions that are held are more strategic than genuine. And I think what Jamaica needs now is genuine partnership, not strategic partnerships for political advantage, but genuine partnership. I keep making the case that in 2017, when murders were rising, the opposition genuinely supported the government in the use of SOEs. In other words, the government could not extend the SOEs beyond 14 days without the opposition voting for it. Policies changed. The opposition changed their position and did not support the SOE. So it took away that tool from the government. There are those who will be making comments which I pay attention to, I read them all the time. It's the government's responsibility. Obviously, it's the government's responsibility. But remember the nature of our democracy. We keep saying we have this strong and robust democracy, but not understanding what it means. That, yes, even the opposition has a role, and our Constitution gives them power. No one is holding them to account as to how they use the power that they have in the Constitution. That is the nature of our democracy and our government. You know, I don't think there is anyone who is stronger on supporting our democracy than I am, and ensuring that this is a free country and everyone can have their freedom of expression and freedom of assembly and freedom of movement. But increasingly, I'm seeing people who are the strongest advocates for this liberal democracy telling me that I need to do what President Bukele did in El Salvador, without fully understanding that Jamaica's constitution and Jamaica's democracy is quite different from El Salvador. But there are measures between what we have now and what El Salvador has put in that if we could come to genuine agreement on, it would give us more tools in our toolbox. So we have been talking about the ESMA, the Enhanced Security Measures Act. And it has gone through several iterations, and it is, in its current state, it is evolved I believe, into a workable solution. So before, the original iteration of the ESMO was to create a more streamlined version of the SOE. We have moved away from that. We're not trying to create a version of the SOE for which, there is a devolved authority to the Prime Minister to declare without the oversight of Parliament. So that's not what we are interested in. Because the challenges that we face and that we need to attack are not necessarily geographical in nature. The criminals are mobile, and so we don't really need to be able to declare an SOE in a particular area to address the criminal threat. What we need is to have measures that are declared against persons who match a particular set of criteria and parameters. So we need to be able to have the designation of persons and have measures targeted to them. We need to be able to have control measures that the courts can put in place to control those persons who have been designated. We need to be able to detain, and that is where the big difference is, I believe, between the government and the opposition. And it's not a difference that I think is insurmountable. We have had discussions before as to what can happen, but there are constitutional issues about the ability to separate known threat actors from communities. Let's face it, all the gangs that we have profiled and we have information on, this is not abstract. It's people. The intelligence services, the police, they have a list of persons based upon intelligence. The question is that intelligence actionable as evidence? And oftentimes it is not. But the intelligence can be graded. It's strong, it's good intelligence. But that intelligence needs to be supervised by a judicial body. Because let's face it, what we wouldn't want in our society is to give the government a power to designate, and then for frivolous political reasons, we start to widely designate people who we don't like. So there has to be checks and balance, and I think that's where the big difference is between us and the opposition. What is the nature of that check and balance to ensure that these extra powers are not used in ways that could be dangerous to our society and become a threat to our liberal democracy? The conversation continues. I always welcome whenever the leader of the opposition says that they are willing to cooperate. So we will take them up on the offer and see what is possible. But of course, it's not just the leader of the opposition, it's all sectors of the society. What are we as a society prepared to tolerate for the safety of every Jamaican? That's what it really comes down to. My role is to lead the conversation, and opportunities like this gives the platform on which the narrative and the conversation can be widened.
Thank you, PM. Thank you, DPM. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Good morning once again, everyone. May we ask when you exit, if you could exit to the right, use the right section. The Prime Minister will just be doing a quick interview for all angles this evening. So we ask that you do it, you exit on the right section. Prime Minister will be on the left.